New leaders' promises will be tricky to keep in crisis hit Sri Lanka's stunning election wins by a new left-leaning president and his party have changed Sri Lanka's political landscape. But the cash-strapped island's new rulers are quickly realizing that campaign promises are easier to make than to keep. Anura Kumara Dissanayak's remarkable victory in the presidential election in September was swiftly followed by a landslide for his National People's Power (NPP) alliance in parliamentary elections that as a new year starts. He and his supporters want this to be a turning point for the country, which is trying to recover from devastating economic crisis and years of misrule. However, they have limited room for maneuver to make good on pledges to voters, whose expectations from the new government are high since the financial meltdown of 2022. Economic recovery has been fragile, and Sri Lanka is far from out of the woods. The NPP won 159 seats in the 225-member assembly in November, an unprecedented two-thirds majority, giving Disanayak a sweeping mandate to push through major economic and constitutional reforms. However, even as the results were coming in, the new president had to gear up for a meeting with a visiting delegation from the International Monetary Fund (IMF), with which the outgoing government had negotiated a $2.9 billion, £2.31 billion bailout package. The IMF deal became controversial as it led to severe austerity measures, tax rises and cuts in energy subsidies, hitting common people hard. During the campaign, Disanayak and his alliance promised that they would renegotiate parts of the IMF agreement. But in his address to the new parliament, he performed a U-turn. The economy is in such a state that it cannot take the slightest shock. There's no room to make mistakes, Disanayak said. This is not the time to discuss if the terms of the IMF loan are good or bad, if the agreement is favorable to us or not. The process had taken about 2 years, and we cannot start all over again. The voters' overwhelming verdict for the NPP is seen as the culmination of a people's uprising triggered by the economic crisis. The uprising toppled President Gotabaya Rajapaksa in the summer of 2022, when Sri Lanka ran out of foreign currency and struggled to import food and fuel. The country had earlier declared bankruptcy after defaulting on its external debt of about $46 billion. India, China, and Japan are among those who have loaned billions of dollars. The recent election results also reflected people's anger towards established political parties of former presidents Mahinda Rajapaksa and Ranil Wickremesinghe and others, for failing to handle the economic meltdown. One of the priorities for Disanayak will be to give some economic relief to the people due to excessive taxation and the cost of living crisis. Debt management is another big challenge. Veteran political analyst Professor Jayadeva Uyengada told the BBC. So far, the massive political changes don't seem to have had any impact on people like Nalukha Dilrukshi, a mother of 4 who lives in a suburb of the capital, Colombo. Her husband is a daily wage laborer, and the family still find it hard to get by. The BBC spoke to her about the soaring cost of living in January 2022, months before mass protests erupted at that time. She said her family was eating only 2 meals a day, instead of 3. And they were giving only vegetables and rice to their children due to the high cost of fish and meat. We are still struggling to make ends meet, and nothing has changed. The price of rice, which is the staple food, has increased further. We are not getting any relief from the government. Mrs. Dilrukshi says people like her want the new government to take immediate steps to bring down the cost of essentials. Sri Lanka is an import-dependent nation, and it needs foreign currency to bring in items like food and medicine. For now, Colombo is able to hold on to its currency reserves as it has suspended its debt repayments. The real struggle, experts point out, will start probably in the next 3 or 4 years when it starts repaying its debt. People's perception of President Disanayak and his new government could change if there's no visible change in their standard of living in the next 2 or 3 years. People have given him a huge mandate. The IMF should respect that by allowing him to give some relief to the people through social welfare programs, says Professor Uyengada, and a careful diplomatic maneuver. Disanayak chose Delhi as his first official overseas destination in mid-December. During the visit, India promised to supply liquefied natural gas for Sri Lankan power plants and work on connecting the power grids of the 2 countries in the long run. China's increasing foothold in Sri Lanka, especially calls by Chinese research vessels to the island's ports so close to India's southern tip, has triggered concern in Delhi. I have given an assurance to the Prime Minister of India that we will not allow our land to be used in any way in a manner that is detrimental to the interest of India, Dissanayake said after talks with Narendra Modi. Delhi will no doubt be pleased with the assurance, but Dissanayake will find out what Beijing expects when he visits China in mid-January. Data extracted from first Jeju Air black box. Korea investigators have finished extracting data from one of the black boxes from the fated Jeju airplane that crashed on Sunday. South Korea's transport ministry has said the data from the cockpit voice recorder will now be converted into an audio file, while a second black box, a flight data recorder, will be sent to the United States for analysis. Investigators hope data on the flight and voice recorders will provide insights about the crucial moments leading up to the tragedy. Some 179 people died after the plane crashed into a structure and exploded, making it the deadliest plane crash on South Korean soil. Investigators say it is not feasible to locally decode the flight data recorder, which was damaged in the crash, and is missing a crucial connector. South Korean experts will be involved in the analysis process in the U.S., they said, adding that they are in discussion with the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, on when to hand over the flight data. Recorded at NTSB has deployed officials to the crash site in South Korea's Muin County to help investigate the cause of the plane crash. The Boeing 737-800 plane was traveling from Bangkok when it crash-landed at Muin International Airport on Sunday and slid into a wall off the end of the runway, bursting into flames and killing everyone on board except 2 crew members. Many questions remain unanswered, and investigators are looking at the role a bird strike or weather conditions may have played. They are also examining the concrete wall at the end of the runway, which some experts say could have exacerbated the impact of the crash. The passengers on Flight 7C-2216 were aged between 3 and 78 years old, although most were in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, according to Yonhap News Agency. 2 Thai nationals are among the dead, and the rest are believed to be South Korean. Authorities have said that it had taken officials days to identify the bodies through fingerprints or DNA, with saliva samples collected from family members, as many of them have been severely damaged. But on Wednesday, Acting President Choi Sang-mok announced that all 179 victims on board the flight have now been identified. New Year's Day celebrations across the country have been canceled or scaled down out of respect for the victims and their family, and authorities have announced a 7-day period of national mourning. At a press conference on Tuesday, Jeju Air CEO Kim Ibe said that the airline was preparing emergency compensation for the victims' families and would cover funeral costs. He also said that a pre-flight inspection of the plane had found no issues. Investigations into the cause of the crash are still ongoing.